As we move deeper into the interactive features of InDesign, we soon discovered that we cannot do a lot without actually combining these features with one another. This is the only way we're going to be able to realize the robust potential that this program has to create fully interactive, immersive presentations. With that in mind, we need to look into our programming skills, into the things that we learned during the programming portion of this course, just from the programming logic perspective. We're not going to be using code within InDesign. Now, that said, full-blown EPUB interactive presentations, books, and magazines, and things like that, they actually do rely on external JavaScript files that you can import into InDesign. There's a way of connecting these things to external script. We're not going to be doing that in this class. It's a bit more advanced, and it goes more into the actual programming portion of developing these things. So what we're focusing on is what can we do with the snippets that the program provides to us right now, and put them together with that programming logic that we learned through that portion of the semester in order to make presentations follow a specific logic. So in this specific video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating animated buttons that then control an animated multi-state object. And for this, we're going to create a slideshow that relies on a rotating menu. And the rotating menu basically is going to be a seamless rotating menu, what we call basically it's just going to be constantly rotating. And then when you roll over your selections, the menu will stop. You click on a button, and then you call a specific state from within the multi-state object. Now, the multi-state object is also going to have a bit of animation into it. So let's get started. For this, what I want to do is I want to create a new file. And I want to make sure that this file is what we've been using so far, but it could be any size. I want to make sure that it is the 1024 by 768. And what I want to do at this point, let's actually choose the standard so that you see how I got to this, how I followed the logic for this. So I'm going to go to mobile, and then I'm going to choose iPad. And you'll notice that it's the same settings that we've always had. I'm going to turn off its primary text frame. And what I want to do in this particular presentation is I'm going to have 5 images. 5 images moved across, spread across the entirety of the real estate that I have on my application. And to do so that they're equally distanced, I want to take advantage of the columns feature of the app, of the actual project, of the document. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have 5 columns. So when I click OK on this, I am going to have 5 column setup. Let me actually do a preview over here without clicking OK, so you see what that is going to do. Now you'll notice that basically each one of these will be an image up here, and it will be a button within my navigation that will be rotating. For this to be seamless, I need to make sure that the spacing amongst all of the images is the same. That means that the space after on this side and after on this side should also be the same as the gutter. So that should be about 12 pixels. That happens to be my left and right margins. So I'm going to unlock the maintaining proportions, and I'm simply going to enter 12 for the left and 12 for the right. And as you'll see, my gutter amongst the images, between the images, and this left and right sides of my application are basically the same. So that gives me a good layout to start working from. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Create. That gives me the actual stage, or the paper, or the page, or the canvas, however you want to call it at this point. Then I want to import 5 images. So I'm going to go and import 5 images, and I'm going to choose them from here. I'm going to spread them out from here, and I'm going to use my right arrow in this case to increase the amount of boxes that come in from that, and that gives me 5 different spaces for images. So there you go. I'm going to align them from the on the margins on the left over here, and then on the right, and that will be the space that my buttons will take. So with that done, I want to make sure that all those buttons fit perfectly within those boxes. So I'm going to right click, going to go to fitting, and fill frame proportionally. Now I can now go back and roll over the center and place the images wherever they make more sense for me visually. This automatically fits them to the center, but you can always go back and revise the position of the images as you need. So I'm going to leave mine as they are for now. Then doing the exact same thing, I'm going to import 5 images once again, the same images, and they're going to be, that menu is going to call a larger version of the image below it. So I'm going to click open on that, and I am going to make the image about 1, 2, 3, 4, so that I have 5 different spaces. There you go. Right click, fit frame proportional, so that they all fit in the same size. Then I'm going to align them to the left, and then I'm going to press Control and Shift to drag and increase the size both of the containers and the images themselves. So now I have those 5 images pretty much set up down here, and they occupy a pretty good space. So that is an enlarged version of the buttons that I have at the top. Now I'm going to turn that into a multi-state object. So I'm going to, with those 5 images selected, I'm going to go to Object States, and I'm going to create a new multi-state object. I'm going to give it a name of veggies in this case. That's going to be my multi-state object called veggies. And I can go ahead and proceed to name each one of the states. So I'm pressing Shift while I click on the name, and this is going to be called beets. I believe those are beets. Yes, they are. Then on this one, that's like the tomatillo thing. So I'm going to press Shift click, and I'm going to call it tomatillo. And then the next one is asparagus. Asparagus. And this one's green onions. Green, or I'm just going to call them onions. Onions, if I could type. And then the last one is radishes. So I'm going to call that one radish. Okay, so I have my states in my multi-state object. Now what I want to do at this point, and I should have done this before I created my multi-state object, is make each one of the states, the content within the states, fade in. I should have created that animation before I made the multi-state object, so that I don't lose any of these things, and that I can show you that even if you get ahead of yourself, let me actually do the changes from in here. So in order to do this, I need to select not the state, which is what's selected right now. You'll notice that you have the empty box here on the right-hand side on the multi-state object. You want to select the actual content. So to do that, you have one of 2 ways to do it. You could double-click the item on the state. So if you double click it, you'll notice that it gets selected. That means that little box is full. That means that you have selected what's inside the state. Or you can always go into your drop down menu for your veggies option here under the multi-state object, then go to radish, and then select the actual image from in there by clicking on that little blue dot on the right hand side. This case is blue because that layer is blue. That's why if the color of the layer was different, then your outline and your dots would be a different color as well. But basically that little dot on the right hand side, that's what allows you to select specific things. So you'll notice that I dug myself into all the way into the state and then the content of the state to select it. So it's the same result. So now with that selected, I'm going to go to the animation menu, and I'm simply going to add a fade in to this. Just a straight on fade in from the standard, from preset. So it's going to be fading in from whatever the preset is, and it's going to be just fade in. That's it. And it's going to take 1 second, which is more than fine for me. Then let me go back to my object states, go to onions, and do the exact same thing. I'm going to double click on the state so that I select the image. Then I go to animation, choose fade in, same fade in, no changes on that, simple fade in. Then close that animation, go to object states, asparagus, double click it to select it, make sure that it's the actual content that is selected, fade in, then go to object states, the tomatillo one, double click it. And by the way, this doesn't just work with fade in, because these are all animations. You could just apply any animation you want. So I'm just using the fade in for elegance right now, but you could choose any animation that fits your design. So as I'm doing this, let me go ahead and select the beats and finish those animations. So they should be just fading in. All of them, it'll take 1 second, and that's it. So basically we're done with that portion. Now, what I want to do now is I want to select these 5 images up here, and I want to turn them into buttons. So to do that, I can literally just go ahead and select them all like this, and go to the buttons menu and go ahead under type and select button. Now what that will do is you'll notice that they all receive the little icon right here, and that indicates that it is a button, but they're all renamed separately. So this is button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, button 5. So if you want to make sense of this, you should rename your buttons. So this one will be button, this will be the radish button. So I'm going to call it radish, double D, I believe. Radish button. And then this is going to be my green onion button. So it will be onion button. This will be the asparagus. So that's too long a word, asparagus. So I'm going to call it ASP button. And this will be the tomatillo one. So it'll be tom button. And this one will be my beets. So that's easy. Beets button. Okay. So that I have renamed all of my buttons. Okay. Now what I want to do at this point is I want each one of them to call a state within that multi-state object. So I can go to this the radish one, and I'll say from the actions on release, I'm going to select go to state, and the state will be my veggies state, which is that, and that's going to call the radish. This one is going to be on release. I'm going to go to state, and I'm going to call the onions. The next one will be the asparagus. So I'll go ahead on release or tab, go to state, and I am going to choose asparagus. This one's going to call the tomatillo one. So I'm going to go to state, and I'll say tomatillo, and I called it tomatillo, but that's okay. So then I'll just go ahead and add another for the last one, which is the beets. I'm going to go to state, and I'm going to choose beets, which is by default. It's the top one. So those buttons should already work with what we have here. So if I go ahead and test this publication right now, my buttons should already have the interactivity to click and select the different states within that specific multi-state object. So if I click on onions, you'll see that there's a fade in, and that is basically the animation inside the multi-state object. Had I chosen to have them fly from the left or from the right, or scale up or scale down, it would have done the exact same thing. So this just looks like a more elegant solution. As you can see, it's non-linear, so this works just fine. But what would be interesting is if I could make that a rotating menu at the top. This is pretty static, and it works well. It works great, and you can actually have a solution like this be for your menu to be on the left or at the bottom. You know, it's your choice. That is more of depending on the design that you're working on. So let me stop that preview for just a second and close the EPUB interactivity menu. What I want to do at this point is I want to select all of these buttons. I want to select all of the buttons at the top, just the buttons. And what I want to do is I want to make a copy of them, an exact copy, and I'm going to move them to the left right here. So I just made copies of all the buttons that I had created, originally for the animation. Then what I want to do is I want to zoom out. So to zoom out, I can use the zoom tool if I want to, or I can use the drop down menu here if I want to zoom out. And you'll notice probably when you do this that your canvas is not as big as mine, your pasteboard. So if you don't have enough pasteboard, by default the pasteboard is based on the size of your page. So if you had a page that was 1024, you probably had a slightly less amount on either side. In this case, I had to double it. To do that, you go to Edit, Preferences, Guides and Pasteboard. Down here, you have the ability to increase the size of your pasteboard to whatever you need in width. So if I want to increase that, I'm going to go to double 1024, so that's 2048 pixels. If I click OK, you'll notice that my pasteboard increased in size. So I believe this goes up to 8,000 pixels, so which is more than sufficient for any application that you're creating. So you have the ability to extend that pasteboard to however big you want it to be. It's not going to affect the output of your project. Okay. So now let's go ahead and zoom into this. And what I want to do at this point is I want to select all of these buttons at the top. I want to select them. I want to make sure that these buttons are aligned. The ones that I made a copy before we actually do that, I want to make sure that they're aligned right at the edge of that, which is 1024. And I see it here by looking at its properties up at the top. So I'm using, by the way, I forgot to tell you this, I am under the digital publishing setting. So that's why I'm seeing everything already activated. And my properties, as you know, move from the right-hand side to the top under that specific workspace. So I have that at 1024, which is exactly where I want it, the width of my stage right now or of my paper is 1024. That's the screen size for an iPad. So this works just fine. So I want to zoom out again, and I want to select all of those buttons. I want to drag a selection across all of them, and then I want to group them. Control G. So they are grouped. Now to this grouping, I want to add an animation coming in from the left. So if I go to the animation menu, I want to choose the preset that flies in from the right. I said left before. It's going to be coming in from the right. So it's going to fly in from the right. And you'll notice that I get the path, and you'll notice that it has the slowdown. And if I look at the preview, it has that fade in. So I want to remove that fade in. That's the first thing. So to do that, I need to go ahead and change the opacity in my options from fade in to none, so that it is static, meaning whatever the value is right now, which is full visibility, that's how it's going to stay. Then I want to remove that slowdown, which is the speed. So I'm going to change the speed from that menu to none, so that my speed is linear. That means no easing, and you'll notice that all my tween frames got evenly spaced. Okay, so with that done, what I want to do at this point is I want to place this image, which is the copy of this image, right at that point, meaning I want to move the entire group to the left until that image is where the other one was, which is right on the first column. So if I zoom in and if I move this, I'm going to get it exactly where I need it. Boom. So now that's where that image is going to end. Notice that I have this to current location, meaning that this is where my animation is going to start from, and it's going to end over here. That's where I want to do. So in order to do this, in order to be able to make it match, I need to select the animation, and then I need to click on this button, the Show Animation Proxy. That's going to show us those gray boxes that tell us where things really start from. And you'll notice that the first box is right here. I need to make that gray box start right where this one is. To do that, I need to move the beginning point of the path, which is here. Now, the problem with the way the program works right now is that as soon as I click on that path, those boxes are going to go. So I'm going to have to do a lot of back and forth between selecting the path and deselecting to see where the gray boxes are. So when I click on the path, you'll notice that the boxes go. But I know that I need to move that point to the right-hand side. So if I stretch that out, I can do it just by stretching it out that much. And then I go back, select the object. You'll notice that I got that box from over here to here. And I'm almost there. I'm almost making it match that radish button over here. So what I want to do at this point is I want to move it even further to the left. So if I calculate this correctly, let me go ahead and use my white arrow tool to select that point on the path. So I select it by clicking on it. You'll notice that it is highlighted. And I'm going to move about 6 pixels to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, I know it's 6 pixels because of trial and error. I've done this before, so I know it's about 6 pixels because of the sizing of my gutter. So it goes 6 pixels past, that is that point right here, and it's 6 pixels before the actual position of the final of the right side of my buttons. So when I deselect that and I select that object, you'll notice that, whoops, hold on for just, there you go. Now it refreshed, and you'll notice that now my box is exactly matching the position of that radish. I'm pressing Control 0 on the keyboard to zoom out to match the size of my canvas to my content, to my viewing area. And I need to double check everything again. I make sure that I don't have any speed easing and I don't have any opacity changes, so we're good. And that I am to current location so that the menu moves to the left to end on this point. So with that done, let's go ahead and take a look to see if I have achieved that to make the menu rotate seamlessly. So I'm going to create a preview, and when this creates, you'll see the menu start rotating right away, and it's going to go by super fast. That's the one thing that I didn't change now that I think about it. So I see it rotating, so that's fine. It's moving to the left, but that's not what I intended to create. Let me go back to the animation with the object still selected, and I want to make sure that my animation gives me enough time to look at the buttons and select the buttons. So if I change that speed from 1 second to about, let's say, 8 seconds, that should give me enough time to check each one of the buttons and know what I am clicking on in order to select what I want to enlarge. And then I want to make sure that the animation loops. That doesn't just play one time, but that it loops. So with that done, let's go ahead and test this once again. Now my animation will play slower, and it's going to start looping seamlessly because of the positioning that I created with the by putting the images based on the column spacing. And as you can see, I have a seamless menu that is repeating 5 images, and each image is basically rotating. Now, if I click on that onion, it's going to go ahead and call the onion thing. If I call the radish, it's going to be whatever image I'm clicking on is going to be called down at the bottom. Now, what would make this really great is if I roll over the button and it actually stops that rotation. And this is the part where we control the animation from the buttons themselves. So I know that we saw a movie, we worked on a movie in the previous week where we had a button that controlled an animation, and the button was outside of the animation. In this instance, we're going to use these buttons to control the animation where they live. So let me go ahead and close that for just a second, and let's go back to my navigation. So first things first, I want to select that object, and I want to double-click the first button here. By clicking on that, double-clicking on the button, I have selected the actual button inside the group. I could also go into my layers window and go into the group and then search which button I want to select. So I can go ahead and select that button from here as well. Either one of the two ways works. So with that done, I want to select that button, go to the buttons area, and oh wait, I already have something that is called on release, go to state. Now remember at the beginning of this video, I said we needed to use the logic that we learned while we were programming. One thing we learned is that the actions that happen usually are triggered by specific events, meaning you have a listener, something that is listening for something to happen. As you saw while we were doing programming, listeners can work with 1, 2, or 3 different listeners at a time, because you can have a mouse click, you can have a rollover, you can have a rollout, you can have all kinds of interactions with one single symbol or with one single movie clip. In this case, think of this button as a movie clip, and it has already one action attached to it, one event is attached to it, which is when I release. So it's listening for a click. It's listening for a release, for a mouse up. And then when you mouse up, you do whatever it's telling you to do, which is called that object from the multi-state object. But you also have the ability to add other listeners to it. So if I go under events to that button with that button selected, and I click on that and I say when I roll over, you'll notice that I don't have a listener for that rollover. And I can say when I roll over, well, what I want to do is I want to go to the animation for my group, and that is if I go under the animation, what animations do I have? These are all the fade-ins from my multi-state object, and the bottom one is the group for the animation for the navigation. I could rename that, by the way, that group, to give it an actual name, so it would be called navigation, but we didn't do that. So if I want to, I just know that these are the ones for the multi-state object, so it must be the group. And when I roll over that button, what I want to do in that group is I want it to pause. Then I'll go under event once again for the same button. When I roll off, meaning when my mouse is out, I want to go to animation, select the object that I want to target, my animation, which is group, and then I'm going to say resume. That's what I want to do on that button. Now I have to do this for every single button. And once you get to doing it, on rollover, I want to do the animation, and I want to select the group, and I want to make sure that I pause on rollover. And then on roll off, I want to make sure that I do animation, and I want to go ahead and go group and resume. Now, it can get tedious, and that's something that Adobe has not addressed, as to being able to copy the actions or the listeners in buttons that you create, to be able to copy and paste those properties, which is not I mean, that would be a time saver, as you can see, because if this is a menu with 50 images, then I have my work cut out for me. But once again, it's just a matter of, it's not difficult because you're really not programming. You're using logic, you're using the programming logic, but you're really not programming anything. You're simply selecting from here what actions you want this to do. So it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, you're using the snippets that have already been pre-programmed on the actual inside InDesign to actually create the actions that you're working on. So let me go ahead and choose resume on that one and roll off, and, whoops, sorry, wrong thing. I want that to happen. I don't want anything to happen right here on this one. What I want to do is on group. That's what I want to target, and I want to resume. Let me see, double check to see if I get the rollover group. Pause, roll off, resume. There you go. So I'm going to only program those 3 for now. Now, I want to, at the same time, I can create all other other rollover states for my button. So if I select that rollover, I might be able to increase the size of it just slightly. So I'm going to make sure that I put my reference point at the center. I want to click on the constraint proportions for height and width, and I want to increase the height to, let's say, 112. Just ever so slightly. I just want to make it bigger. Now, I actually increased the container size, not the image size, so I apologize for that. But you could actually go in and create rollover states to make changes to make something like, for example, if you roll over the thing, it increases in size to indicate that you're over it if you need to. Now, with these 3 buttons programmed already, let's go to the EPUB preview, hit play, and see what we get. So the first 3 buttons should stop my animation when I roll over them. So if I roll over, I'm just gonna roll over this one, and you'll notice that it stops it. And when I roll out, it goes away. Now, this is not the actual button, that's the copy. So at this point, my buttons are gonna switch at some point, and when I roll over the actual button, there you go, that's the asparagus, not this one, that is the copy. So if I roll over the actual button, which I believe is, because they're all the same, I'm just gonna keep it up here. And it'll tell me which one, so that's asparagus. Okay, so if I click on that, that's gonna, and I click on it, it's gonna call the asparagus. Which other button did I not? Which ones did I program is the thing that I'm trying to remember. So let me go back and check my programming. Okay, so I'm gonna go back, double click the beats, the first one, and I'm gonna say, okay, buttons, animation on roll off, animation group resume, and on rollover, animation group pause. So the very first one should work just fine. So let's test it again. The very first button. So I'm going to be around here just waiting for it to start. And when I start, it would be the first 3 buttons. So that one stops it. And if I click, I'm calling that particular image. If I roll out, it rolls. If I roll over the onions, it stops. If I click on it, there it is. It calls the onions. If I roll out, it rolls. Roll over, click on that, it calls that one. So those were the 3 buttons that I programmed. So by this point, on the right-hand side of the screen, you're seeing the onions show up. That is the second. That is the copy of my onions. This one just works for calling because I didn't add the stop action to that one. So there, that's the one now. This is the one that and there's the radishes on the other side. So let's see. Boom, boom, boom. When the radishes switch, which is right now, it's going to stop right there. Click on radishes. Click on onions, and so on. So as you can see, this creates a more interesting set of navigation, number 1. And it combines a lot of the elements based on the programming logic that we followed from what we learned during the programming part of the course, where we integrate this idea of having listeners and the functions that they call, in this case, stopping something or starting something or pausing an animation, and all of that basically is already pre-cooked and integrated within the within the program itself. And for you, you just need to have that logic to be able to combine the different elements to make sure that your presentations make full use of the entire power of interactivity that the program offers.